Every now and then you come across a phrase in the Bible that sounds, well, it sounds big and important, but also really mysterious. The fullness of the Gentiles is definitely one of those. It sounds so profound, but what does it actually mean? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack together.
And here's the source, right from the Apostle Paul's letter to the Romans. He says this, "Partial hardening has happened to Israel, but it's not forever. It lasts until something specific happens. The fullness of the Gentiles has come in." It's like Paul's handing us a two-part puzzle, and we need both pieces to see the full picture.
So yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? What is this fullness? What does it have to do with this partial hardening? And here's the thing, you can't just pluck this one verse out of its context and expect it to make sense. We have to zoom out.
To get to the bottom of it, we have to look at the whole letter Paul wrote. And get this, Paul himself calls it a mystery. He's building this massive, airtight, logical argument for his readers, and our little mystery phrase is like the capstone on one of his most important points.
See, this is about way more than just defining a term. It's about finding our place in this grand, unfolding story that God has been writing since the very beginning of time. It's a story that includes everybody, Jews and non-Jews who are also called Gentiles.
So before we can even think about jumping into chapter 11, we got to start where Paul starts. He spends the first chunk of his letter laying the groundwork, building a solid foundation for what he calls righteousness. And trust me, understanding this part is absolutely crucial to solving our puzzle.
You can just see Paul's brilliant mind at work here, right? Look at the flow. First, he levels the playing field. He makes it crystal clear that everyone, it doesn't matter if you're a Jew or a Gentile, has a sin problem. We're all in the same boat. Then he presents the solution. God gives us righteousness. We can't earn it. It's a gift we receive through faith in Jesus. And finally, the payoff. That gift brings us peace with God and a security that can never be broken.
But this creates a huge question. It's the elephant in the room that Paul knows his readers are thinking about. If God is so incredibly faithful to keep his promises to all these new believers, then what about all the promises he made to the nation of Israel? To be honest, it kind of looked like God had forgotten about them. And that's a tension Paul absolutely has to address.
So, to tackle that question, Paul gets super specific. We have to keep three distinct groups straight in our heads. First, you've got ethnic Israel, the physical descendants of Abraham. Then you have believing Gentiles, non-Jews who put their faith in Jesus. And finally, you have believing Jews. Keeping these categories clear is the key to unlocking the rest of his argument.
All right, so now we get to the first big clue in our mystery verse, this idea of a partial hardening that's happened to Israel. Paul brings this up to explain what was going on in the world right in front of him.
So what on earth does that mean? Well, it's a way of describing how the nation of Israel, as a whole, didn't recognize Jesus as the Messiah. But the key words here, and Paul chose them so carefully, are partial and temporary. It wasn't a total hardening because tons of individual Jewish people did believe. And, as we're about to see, it wasn't a permanent condition either.
And this brings us to our second clue. And honestly, this is where the story takes this incredible, almost shocking plot twist. Paul argues that this very hardening of Israel led to a massive blessing for literally everyone else on the planet.
You see the incredible cause and effect here? Because Israel as a nation rejected their Messiah, the purpose of his coming was expanded. His death on the cross wasn't just for them, it was for the sins of the entire world. And because of that, the good news of salvation just exploded out to all the non-Jewish nations.
But Paul wants to make it crystal clear that this was not some kind of plan B. No way. He connects it all the way back to the original promise God made to Abraham thousands of years before, that through his seed, all the peoples of the earth would find blessing. This was always part of the master plan.
And for Paul, this wasn't just abstract theology, this was his life. He completely embraced this unique calling God gave him to be the apostle to the Gentiles. He saw it as his personal mission to take this amazing news to the ends of the earth.
Okay, so we're getting close. But to really understand the timing of all this, that little word until in our verse, we have to zoom out and look at a prophetic framework laid out centuries earlier by the prophet Daniel. This is the final piece of the puzzle.
So, way back in the Old Testament, Daniel received this incredible prophecy. It's like a divine stopwatch for the nation of Israel, set for 490 years. It predicted that after 483 of those years, the Messiah would show up and be cut off. And then, the clock stops.
There's a pause, a gap of undefined time before the final 7 years of that prophecy kick in.
And that gap, that pause in Israel's prophetic clock, that's where we are. That is the age we are living in right now. It's the period that Jesus himself called the times of the Gentiles, when God's primary focus has shifted to calling people from every single nation.
Okay, let's put all the pieces on the table. We've got the partial hardening of Israel. We've got the incredible blessing that came to the rest of the world because of it. And we have this prophetic gap in the timeline. Now we can finally put it all together and solve Paul's mystery.
So here it is. The fullness of the Gentiles is the complete number, a specific number known only to God, of non-Jews who will be saved during this current age, this time of the Gentiles. It's not a vague idea. It's a divinely determined quota.
And that is the until from our original verse. That partial hardening of Israel has an expiration date. It lasts right up until that very last Gentile person who is supposed to be part of God's family is brought in. Once that number is complete, this era ends.
So what happens then? Well, the source material is emphatic. God is not finished with Israel, not by a long shot. He will then turn his primary focus back to the nation and fulfill every single one of the remaining promises he made to them. It's just this incredible picture of God's faithfulness to everyone.
So you see, this one little phrase opens up this huge, detailed, and patient plan that spans the entire globe and all of history. The takeaway isn't just a dictionary definition, it's a whole new lens for seeing the world. And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to think about. How does knowing that we're living in this specific chapter of God's grand story change how we see what's happening in the world today?